computer. Okay, we're recording. So Cousin Ralph, I'm gonna ask you some questions, and we're probably gonna get some interruptions. Close the door,
Looks that
please.
way.
Who wants the baby?
Okay, come get it and go. Come get it and go. There's little Olivia. Okay, I'm gonna lock the door. All right, so I guess the first question starts in the beginning. Where did you grow up, and anything you want to share from childhood memories?
Well, I grew up I lived in Brooklyn until I was 5 years old. And then we moved to Manhattan. We moved to Columbus Avenue and 78th Street. And we lived in Manhattan until I was about 12 and a half. We lived in about 5 or 6 different apartments in Manhattan. When I grew up in Brooklyn, we lived with my aunt. And then we moved, as I said, to Manhattan and lived in 5 or 6 different places. Every time they wanted to get their rent paid, we moved. And we usually lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, either mostly on the first floor. So we lived in Manhattan, and that was it. Then we moved to Brooklyn with my another aunt. I was first born, we lived with my mother's twin sister. And we moved back to Brooklyn when I was about 12 and a half. And we lived with my father's twin sister and my grandfather. And we lived there for maybe 3 years and 2 or 3 years. And then we moved to Brighton Beach in Brooklyn. We took a apartment and wound up having 2 different apartments that we moved to. And then later we moved to another apartment. And then later we moved to an apartment where my parents were in one house and I was in a house next door.
What?
And then back to Brighton Beach. And then back, then I met my wife when I was in college and got married. And I finally moved to my own apartment. In the interim, I went into the Army. I was stationed overseas in Bermuda and got out and used the Army Bill of Rights to afford to go to college, and supplemented that by driving a taxi cab at night. Bless you.
Thank you.
By driving a taxi cab at night and over the weekends. So I was able to pay for my college education. I got the job driving a taxi cab in New York because my father's brother owned a fleet of taxi cabs. And he got me to drive, and I drove in Midtown Manhattan all the time, got held up a few times. And would work from 4 o'clock in the afternoon to midnight on weekdays and 4 o'clock in the afternoon to 4 in the morning on weekends. And made a fair degree of money. I wound up picking up a reporter from the New York Daily News who asked me what I was doing with all those books. And a week later, he called me at home and wrote a full-page story about me in the New York Daily News. But that was pleasant. And we were quite poor, but we really didn't know we were poor. We were just average. And that's the story of my life before I got married.
Do you have any childhood memories? Like, which was your favorite apartment, or
No, I never had a favorite apartment.
Too much moving?
Yeah, too much moving. Really not very good memories of the places that we lived in. And you know, I look at those places in Manhattan that we lived in, and now they're rather fancy places with high rents and very expensive. Uh, but at the time we lived there, trust me, they were not.
Oh gosh. Were
Uh,
they the? Go ahead.
but everything has a happy ending, and so it ended perfectly. I can't complain. Uh, not everybody starts off with a silver spoon. Uh, now, your father Eugene, his mother Rose, your grandmother. Uh, you know, I knew her quite well when we lived in Manhattan, because she was always getting Eugene into Broadway shows. And then periodically I would take Gene because I was about 12 years older than Gene, on the bus to the shows that he was in during matinees, and he was terrific. Uh, then when I moved to Brooklyn, we didn't see each other as much as we would have liked to. And he also moved to the Bronx near Yankee Stadium. And when I would go see him, it would be great because I would go on the roof of the building that he lived in, and we would watch the Yankee games from the roof. So that was fine. That was very nice. Would I have liked to have done it more? Yeah, but getting from Brooklyn to the Bronx, it was only when your parents decided to visit. My father decided to visit his sister, so that's when we were able to do it.
Yeah.
And then we gravitated. Eugene was living on 56th Street off 9th Avenue in Manhattan, and I was at that time living in New Jersey, and we had gotten married. I had 2 children, and if I remember correctly, he was living with a roommate who I think eventually married Barbara Streisand.
Oh, Elliot. Maybe Elliot Gould.
Yeah, yeah, that's who it was. And they were both doing things in plays. And then Eugene migrated to Southern California to become, I believe, an assistant director, doing TV shows. And he never loved it, or they never loved him. It never really clicked. And it's a tough, tough industry, according to cousin Eugene. And he wound up, I think, selling things, but without health insurance. And I remember he called and said, I don't have any health insurance. And I put him on the payroll as one of my employees, a salesman in California, which he didn't know anything about selling doors to windows, but we put him on the payroll. And then, unfortunately, as you know, he passed away. But thank God he had putting him on the payroll gave him life insurance, which he had, which I think went to pay for your college education.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That
And
was such a bonus.
I remember going out to California for the funeral, and it was a horrible, sad event.
Yeah.
And his roommate, Elliot Gould, was there at the funeral. And very sad.
Yeah.
And then you came along.
Yeah. But I think my dad was born in 38, but I think you said you were 12 years older than him. I don't think
You know, the difference is 12 years between my brother and I. You're right. There's about a 5-year difference between Ellie and I.
Oh, you and your brother are 12?
Eugene and I. There's
Okay.
12 between Elliot and 5 between Eugene.
Okay, got it. Okay, so he was the little 5 years younger cousin. Okay, that helps to perspective. Okay. Um, and then let me make sure I've got it straight. So your dad and Rose were brother and sister.
That's correct.
Okay, and both your parents were twins?
No, no. On my mother's side, not my father's side, on my mother's side, my mother was a twin.
Okay.
And when I was first born, we lived with my mother's twin sister.
Oh, okay. Got it. All right. And what can you tell me about the Delmans?
Okay, I told you a little bit about myself. The Noodleman family, as you know, it was Noodleman that I changed the name to Delman, which my father was quite upset with, but my mother thought it was a good idea. And after my father passed away, my mother didn't change her name, but she would spell it N-U, capital D-E-L-M-A-N, so that she would perceive that everybody would call her Mrs. New Delman.
Hmm.
And people would look at it and say, oh, Noodleman. So that never really worked. And then after my mother passed away, my brother changed his name to Delman. So, but now to the rest of the Delman family. My father had a brother Irving who owned some taxi cabs and also a hack line. A hack line is a group of limousines that take people from the Lower East Side to the Catskill Mountains. And in the wintertime, they take them from the Lower East Side to Lakewood, New Jersey, or Atlantic City. And so my father worked for my brother for a period of time, his brother for a period of time. And I used to hitch rides up to the Catskills. And then when I was old enough, I got a job working at one of the famous hotels called the Concord. And my uncle rather got me that job, which I was totally unqualified for. And the first day, as a busboy, I was carrying a tray and I ran around and I dropped the whole tray on another table of people. And the result was, on my first day, I was fired. So I went to another hotel and they said, where have you worked before? And I said, well, I've always been at the Concord. And they felt that was a terrific reference. So they hired me right away. And then I was able to balance a tray and do all of the things that you had to do with a tray. And I made a fair amount of money spending the summer in the Borscht Belt as a waiter, busboy, and so on. But now about the rest of the Delman. So that was my uncle, Irving, who passed away rather young. And then there was Aunt Rose, who I'll tell you about later. Aunt Sophie was a school teacher, a dedicated communist who got the Daily Worker, held meetings in the House, and traveled the world. After her husband, Eddie, passed away, Eddie was a lawyer who worked at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. He passed away. She would travel the world, and we got postcards from her all over the world. And since we had never been anywhere at that stage of our life, that was an exciting to receive a postcard from her. And let's see. So we had Rose, Sophie, Irving, and my grandfather, Joseph, who ran a tire shop in Brooklyn. And the one story I remember about my grandfather, Joseph, who was a strong, strong man. He used to go swimming out in the Coney Island and swim way out and then come back. He was an ox of a man. He used to change the tires by himself. And then one day we got a phone call. My father answered it. And we were living in Brooklyn at the time, in Brighton Beach. And my father was talking, and then he started talking in Yiddish and started talking rather fast and loud and so on. And then he said, kid, jump in the car and come with me. And so he always called me kid because I don't think he knew my name. But I got in the car and we drove to my grandfather's tire store, which was on Coney Island Avenue and Cotelia Road. And my grandfather was going, "Oi, oi, oi, what he did, what he did." And it seems it was the first cold day in the fall. You know, in October and November, when the weather goes from like 50 to 25. And so he came into the store, and the store was cold and damp. And he lit the potbelly stove. And then he realized he had hid all of his money in the potbelly stove. And because those days, they didn't trust banks.
Right.
So his bank was the potbelly stove. In fact, I remember when I would ask my father for $5 to go out, he would unscrew the light switch, and behind every light switch there was $5 or $10.
Oh, wow.
So it was a different life than what you have now. It's a different life than what I have now. An interesting memory. So those are, Rose was the most outstanding one of the family. She was the stage mother. After Gus passed away, several years later, she married Mickey. Mickey worked for my uncle Irving as a driver, and then he ran the business, and then he inherited the business. And Mickey was a great guy. He really was. I don't
Do you
know if you
remember
ever.
do you remember where Mickey was from? Because that's where I got my last name, but I don't know where he was from.
Mickey was from New York, of course. At least I'm positive he was. He never really said he wasn't. So I assumed he was.
But I mean, like ethnic, like origins, maybe Syrian or Turkish or.
I don't know.
Okay.
I really don't. And that is where you got your last name from, or else you'd be called Stein.
Right.
So Mickey was terrific, and he, I think they had a great relationship, and they had a wonderful marriage until Mickey got ill, I think. I think Mickey got sick and passed away, or was she,
No,
or
he
did she divorce
remarried. I
Mickey? He
remember, yeah, they
remarried,
got divorced, yeah.
and then she married somebody else, and they lived in Marathon, Florida. As a matter of fact, they became great friends with one of the families here in Toledo. And we went down there a few times, and they had boats, and go fishing, and lived a nice life. So that was my father's side of the family, an interesting side. None of them are around anymore.
Yeah.
The children of my father's side of the family, I've totally lost contact with them. Irving's daughter, he had one daughter, her name was Sally. She did the unthinkable. When her father passed away, she showed up with a black man. But in those days, that was unthinkable. In today's days, that is, as you know better than anybody else, not unthinkable.
Right.
And whatever happened to Sally, we've lost track. Sophie had one son, David, who all I remember about him was he was a spoiled brat, and I really hated him. But since I had to live with him, that's what was the reason. And I have no idea where he is today, and so on. David was about the same age as me, maybe a year younger. And as you know, Rose only had one child. So we have a small family. My kid brother, Elliot, as you know, has just moved last year out to Colorado Springs with his wife. I haven't seen it, but they have a lovely home out there in a country club community. And Elliot, I hired Elliot to work for me. I moved him up from Florida and gave him a territory from Pittsburgh to Buffalo. And then he did rather well working for me. We taught him the window business. And then when my son Gary went into when he took Elliot with him, he kept Elliot. And then when Gary started his own business, he gave Elliot a piece of the business and made him a partner, a small piece. And Elliot worked for Gary for many years and finally sold out a small piece and was able to retire comfortably. And he moved to Florida permanently and then moved from Florida because it was too hot in the summer to Colorado Springs. He did something that I'm not able to do. He bought a house in Colorado Springs without his wife seeing it. And but when she did see it, she liked it, and life goes on very nicely. Since he lives on a golf course but doesn't play golf, he mails me golf balls that he finds. So I have an overabundance of golf balls. My son.
And how many holes in ones do you have at this point?
Four.
Four.
It's all luck. It's not skill. It's all luck. Okay. My son has done very well. He's sold his business to various hedge funds and has a huge home in Aspen, Colorado, and a big home here. My two grandsons, one is his third year of surgery, transplant surgery in Cincinnati, and the other works in a company in Denver, Colorado, and has been working there for 6 years now. And my grandson in Cincinnati, the surgeon, is going to make me a great grandfather in February. Oh, so that's very nice. My daughter Michelle is doing terrific in Tampa, Florida. You've been there. Husband's an invasive cardiologist or an interventional cardiologist. They have 3 kids. Nathan, who works in the stock market in Chicago, is doing quite well. Jacob has started an auto leasing business and leases BMWs, Lexus, Mercedes, and a host of other luxury cars. And his business is booming because people don't want to go into car dealerships. So he's doing well. And then there's Lauren, who is still looking to find herself. I wish she would look a little bit harder. As we speak, she's driving down to my house in Boca to visit, and she's going to stay in Boca for a few days visiting one of her friends. Okay. So my family has turned out very well. You've turned out super, Leslie.
Thank you.
I've got a great life. I've got a beautiful home in Florida and a beautiful home up here in Toledo, a group of nice friends. And everything has worked out very, very well for my side of the family. Interesting, my mother's side of the family is very, very religious. Very, very orthodox. And we really have found we have very little in common, except for the fact that we're family. They haven't spoken to me, nor have I spoken to them in many years. I get invited to weddings that are ultra-Orthodox weddings. And we went to one, and, we didn't know anybody. We felt like outsiders, and we never went back. And that's about what we've been doing. So after I had a full life of working and starting a business and selling my business and going on the board of ThyssenKrupp in Germany and then retiring. I retired when I was 67, totally. I've had a good life. And my kids are doing well, and I can't be happier. So that's my story, condensed.
Yeah, it sounds like you overcame a lot in life.
Well, I'm not the only one. There are many, many people who have. In fact, I'm reading an interesting book by David Rubenstein, How to Lead. And the book is based upon many people who have dropped out of college, have dropped out of high school, and have accomplished a lot. Bill Gates dropped out of college. Jeff Bezos dropped out of high school. Some fascinating stories out there, and they became much more successful than I could ever dream of becoming. So,
Right.
you know, you don't have to start with a silver spoon in your mouth. Every step is a step up rather than a step down. So it's been good. And what else can I answer for you? Share with me.
Let's see, I've got these questions. I can ask you some and you can run with whichever you'd like. Who is your best friend?
Well, you have different best friends as life goes on. Your best friends when you lived in Brooklyn stop being your best friends when you moved to, when you lived in Manhattan, stop being your best friends when you moved to Brooklyn. And then your best friends who were your best friends in Brooklyn stop being your best friends when you move out to Long Island.
Yeah.
And then the same occurs when you move to New Jersey, and the same occurs when you move to Toledo, and the same occurs when you have two houses, one group of friends in Florida, one group of friends in Ohio. So it's best friends come and go. I don't have any really best friends from when I was 7 years old or from when I was 15, because life changes. If I were to call somebody today I'll give you an example. I had a best friend when I lived in Brooklyn, and I called him, and when I was, after I had sold my business, I just wanted to reminisce. And he was a stockbroker. He was working for a brokerage firm. And the only thing he could think of was trying to sell me securities. He couldn't care less about anything else.
Oh.
And so people change, when stickball was important at one time to a group, it's no longer important. And we find we don't have the same things in common anymore. So I think best friends change as you change, as you mature, as you move to different geographical areas, as your tastes change, things change. Politics changes best friends.
That's true.
And so you find, especially in this particular year of this election between Trump and Biden, you find people who you were very friendly with now who have totally different political agendas than you have, you might not be that friendly with, unfortunately. And that's a sad commentary on today's times, but it is a commentary on today's times.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready for your next question.
Let's try this one. What personality or character trait do you admire most in others and or yourself?
I admire hard work, intelligence, a sense of humor, and not taking everything seriously. That sums it up.
That sounds, yeah.
I admire that in others and in myself.
Of all the things you've accomplished in your life, what has given you the deepest sense of fulfillment?
Well, you could break it down into two things. The business accomplishments in one segment of my life, and the family accomplishments in the other segment of my life. The fact that I've got two tremendous children, five great grandchildren, a very successful marriage, a very good marriage. And so I've accomplished, I think, not the American dream, the worldwide dream. And so that gives me a great sense of satisfaction. I have a great life and I'm very happy for it. So far at this age, I'm still relatively healthy. Uh, we still play bridge and play golf a lot. I play golf 3 days a week. And we'll be looking forward to leaving to Florida on October 10th. So it's a good life.
Yeah. What would you say is the secret to a long, healthy, happy marriage?
I think you could sum it up in 2 words. Empathy is being one. And, well, I traveled a lot, so I wasn't home that much. So you could say that as being them. But now I am home. Yeah, empathy, good humor, and respect, mutual respect for each other.
Mm. And what would you say are some of the keys to being successful in business?
Luck, hard work, good timing, understanding of your customers' needs and understanding of your employees' needs.
Mm.
A peek into the future as to where you want to be. Being able to create a perception that is the perception you want to create. I could go on with that for a long, long time, but I hear kids in the background, so look.
All right, well, we can end. I could ask you about do you consider yourself a spiritual person?
A what person?
Spiritual.
No, not at all.
All right. Well, we've gone for a good time. Do you have anything you want to memorialize here in our last few minutes?
Not really. I think I've given you a good short history of my life, my family, your family.
Yep.
And tell me about your future. What do you look for in the future?
Oh gosh, good question. Well, right now I'm changing my business, restructuring from solo attorney to small business. So I'm learning lots of different business things. So that keeps me busy, thinking about marketing and money mindset. And then at the same time, I'm trying to raise 2 girls, 2 biracial girls in a very interesting time in society. So, making sure that I'm educating them and making sure they're conscious, socially conscious, emotionally conscious, all that fun stuff. Yeah, and then I'm in my relationship with Steve now 6.5 years, so trying to make it be the long term, raising 2 young kids with, no family around, so it's just us. We don't have that much support. So I'm sure you remember what that was like.
Well, I think the great thing is your timing in moving to Long Island.
He was good.
Your timing was terrific.
Yeah.
You probably didn't realize it at the time, but I would assume the house values where you're living have increased significantly.
I hope so, especially now everybody's wanting to get out of, there's an exodus from the city to Long Island, so.
And you're in Rockville Center, right?
We're near there, we're in Franklin Square.
Franklin, okay. And Sophie lived in Rockville Center.
Oh, okay. My great aunt then, okay. Isn't there a story about a kid who drowned in the family?
Yeah, one of my father's brothers, very young, they used to go to Coney Island swimming, and one of them drowned very, very young.
Oh gosh. So there was 5 kids at one point, or 6.
Let's see. Count on your fingers.
Okay.
Rose,
Okay.
Mac, Irving, Sophie, and the one that passed away.
Okay, 5. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, but we it's a nice town, Franklin Square. We have a nice backyard. The girls have had a great summers with the quarantine and staying at home. So it's definitely worked out in terms of that because we were in a little teeny apartment in Brooklyn.
What about the school?
So she started school last week, was her first week, kindergarten. And she's in person, wears a mask, and they have like 50% capacity. So I think where they would normally have 30 kids, now they only have 15. So far, so good. I don't expect it to last. I expect there'll be an outbreak at some point.
Where were the other 15?
Virtual.
Oh, does she switch to virtual?
No, they've said it's like 2 different schools, and just like you can't change classes in the middle of a semester, you can't switch to virtual. So that's the plan as of now. So yeah, I mean they seem like they're taking a lot of precautions. They reassure us that they, as school administrators, are also parents, and they're very concerned, and they're trying to do the best for everyone. So we'll see. But there's
what business are you starting?
Estate planning. So I'm going to be, right, my practice has been real estate, evictions, immigration, and general litigation. So now I'm going to focus on estate planning, which, is more like I'm selling packages, it's flat fees. I know what I'm going to get each time, so to speak, and doing marketing, even on Facebook, like little videos of, have you thought about what would happen if you died? Who would raise your kids? That kind of stuff. So trying to strum up, I've never done any marketing, typical attorneys, we just rely on referrals. So it's really like this whole other business model where I'm streamlining everything. I'm going to have people for doing data entry, people for answering the phones, and then my job will just be consultations and reviewing the documents. So
have you considered joining a law firm that specializes in estate planning?
I hadn't, but yeah, no, right now the focus is on developing my practice, but if it doesn't go well, I would probably have to do that. Yeah, that would probably be, but
yeah, I have one that I use in Florida, a law firm that does all estate planning and all the tax shelters that are necessary to do, all of the corporations that you need to establish. So it's good to deal with somebody who just does nothing but specialize in that segment of law.
Right. Yeah. That's my goal, is to transition away from that and into this. So I do need like mentors. So I'm kind of networking with people because there's a lot I don't know, and I don't want to do a disservice to my clients. So it's.
But you also need a relationship with a good accounting firm.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm working on that. I met an accountant. He says he knows trust. So yeah.
He also knows people that he could recommend.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I'm reaching out to like personal injury attorneys. If their clients get a big lump sum of money, do they want to think about protecting it? Family divorce attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, my goal is to make $1 million in a year. That's my goal.
That's easy.
Yeah.
How's Steve doing? How's the apartment in Chicago or the house in Chicago coming?
Gosh, it's coming, and then apparently there was like a sewer problem in the street that the city's trying to fix, but it's backing up into his house.
Oy.
Yeah. So he's it was an unexpected, typical setback that he's having to deal with. But it's still moving along. And now he's looking at another property here in Garden City. I don't know if you're familiar with Garden City, but
Yeah.
There's a property that's going up for auction in an estate sale that's, the price is pretty low. So if he can get the right price and then flip it, he could make a nice investment on it. So
Well,
yeah.
wish him luck.
I will. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to run downstairs and do a bunch of things with my wife.
Okay.
And
So I'm going to
It-
stop the recording and I'll send you a link and you can share it with any of your family in case they,
do you have Elliot's cell phone number?